want to welcome everybody to the University of Louisville Logistics and Distribution Institute meeting here. We got a virtual roundtable thanks to the fine gentleman here with me to talk about warehouse automation and robotics in the future day. My name is Drew Eubank. I'm the Senior Director of Engineering for Advanced Handling Systems. I'll be moderating today. On the phone, virtually, we have a couple guests. First, I'll let Mike introduce himself.
My name is Mike Brown. I'm based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Grew up in this industry my entire career. Been involved in various companies and automations and technologies, and have currently been working with various robotics companies as an advisor to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. The other person we have on the phone is Mr. Zach Boehm. Zach, mind introducing yourself?
My name is Zach Boehm. I'm the Senior Director of Innovative Systems for AHS. And so I've been in the automation industry for over 15 years now, focusing on different types of robotic systems and different types of emerging technologies.
Thanks, Zach. And then I'll start to my left here. Matt?
Hi, Matt Hardenberg. I'm the Senior Director of Distribution for Ariat International. So my responsibilities for all of our U.S. distribution centers.
Thanks, Matt.
Great. I'm Jordan Frank. I'm our Senior Director of System Sales with AHS. My day-to-day responsibility is working within the traditional conveyance and sortation systems along with the robotics that feed into distribution centers.
Awesome.
And then I'm Chip Steffey. I'm Director of Industrial Engineering for North America for UPS Supply Chain Solutions. I've been in the 3PL business for about 15 years, so here to advise.
Awesome. Well, guys, really appreciate you joining today to ask a couple questions. If it's okay, Mike, we'll get started with you. The first question is, Mike, as a longtime industry executive and having participated in some groundbreaking technology at both the ground and now board levels, how do you feel the pandemic has changed the roadmap for the types of warehouse automation that customers are evaluating and ultimately beginning to procure?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. For context, let me start with my view kind of pre-pandemic. And I would say that a big shift, obviously, that has occurred with senior level customers that I talk to and the companies that are serving them is that there's been a lot of alternative solutions that go well beyond the traditional convey and sort kind of solutions that distribution companies have deployed very effectively. And these alternative automation solutions include a whole variety of robotics, different types of robotic solutions. But it's only, even up to the pandemic, it was only about 5% penetration of what customers were doing. The other thing is that labor costs were still pretty well under control pre-pandemic and running about at the rate of inflation. So it made it very difficult for people that were sponsoring new projects to replace some of their existing technology with more effective technology to get them through their capital hurdle rates. So post-pandemic, significant shift is that labor costs are far outpacing inflation. A couple of customers have told me they feel that it's accelerated labor costs by 5 years. And a few other executives in the industry have told me they're seeing their cost increase over the last 2 years, labor cost increase over 15 to 20%. So obviously the dynamics for an ROI have greatly shifted in favor of deploying automated solutions. The next thing is that there's now a big sense of urgency to reduce labor costs. Executives I talk to are getting pressed very hard by their CFOs. They've got to get more labor costs out of their operations. And what that is driving is a demand for faster deployment of solutions from, say, the conceptualize to procure to go live. And upon go live, they want them coming up much faster and production ready much earlier in the cycle than typically has been accepted. The third big trend, if you would, that's pandemic has driven is, of course, we all know that everybody has been forced into living at home and buying online. So that impact has rippled through dramatically And it's created the coming of age of robotic solutions. Not that there won't continue to be traditional solutions, conveyors, sorters, racks, whatever way material was picked, packed, and shipped. But robotics have definitely come of age, and there's a learning curve with it. Customers are very interested now in learning more about how to deploy this flexible, fast automation that reduces their labor cost. And then the final thing that I see is that there's a real sense of urgency for adoption in brownfields. Traditionally, greenfields were the way, and there was a tolerance for a project that from gleam in the eye to go live at a productive state would be 2 to 3 years. Customers are now needing solutions that can be conceptualized, deployed, and production ready in 6 months. So this is a tremendous opportunity for not just the companies like AHS that serve these customers, but the customers themselves to get very rapid payback and help them with getting their labor cost back in control. So that's pretty much it, Drew.
Awesome. Any other panelists have any feedback to that question? Awesome. Thanks for the insight there, Mike.
Yeah.
Jordan,
Yes, sir.
what change in mentality have you experienced with your customers, those who traditionally lean on more proven warehouse automation, that is creating the avenue for those same customers introducing emerging forms of warehouse automation into their current fulfillment operations?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. It's a great question. So what we've seen over the past probably 2 to 3 years is an adoption of newer technologies. In the material handling world, there's a lot of proven technologies that have really been successful over the last 20, 30 plus years. And those technologies were created to fill a certain void. And Mike, you said it earlier around the e-commerce growth, people sitting at home, the shopping in the stores happening less. And what that's led to is a new shift in how distribution works. Retail fulfillment and e-commerce are very different avenues of fulfillment. And to put it in perspective, when you're fulfilling to a store, you're going to usually fulfill a case quantity because a store needs a case quantity to stock their inventory. Whereas when you're a consumer at home, you're not buying a case quantity, you're buying a single unit. So all of a sudden, when retail fulfillment, where you're pulling cases, palletizing those, and sending them to stores, you're now having to get individual units, what we call an each, and put it into the same outbound carton to deliver to a consumer. So now instead of picking 50, 60,000 cases in a day, you have to pick 50 or 60,000 eaches in a day that have to get into the same boxes representative of their orders. So why do I bring that up? Well, I bring that up because technology is a great thing, and it evolves to continue to be better than its predecessor. So what we have seen through this shift in the market of going to more e-commerce fulfillment is the need for new technologies to fill those voids. The existing technology was really around case transportation, case sortation, and case storage. But now with the introduction of these eaches, it creates those two challenges. One I spoke to is just the fulfillment of eaches to an order. And the second challenge is flexibility. In the distribution world over the past 12 to 18 months, there was a significant amount of growth in that e-commerce channel. And all of a sudden, people were posed with these distribution centers that were built to fulfill a purpose that was no longer needed. And it was something completely separate now. So some of the technologies that we have seen come out of that are around that each picking, that each fulfillment, and they're very scalable. So if I needed to add additional storage to satisfy my requirements, I can do that without having the additional capital cost of the additional throughput. So what we have found is that these technologies, whether they be goods-to-person technologies, whether they be person-to-goods technologies, autonomous mobile robots, were all born to fill a specific niche in the e-commerce world. So, Drew, you asked me a question. Why all of a sudden are people willing to buy less proven technology? They can't afford not to. It's a requirement to stay relevant in the industry, to cut down labor, and to continue to operate efficient systems that maximize flexibility.
You know, Matt, that actually feeds in very well for you, and just so happens that you are our next customer up. So if you don't mind, I'm going to roll into your question here. As you look to the future of your distribution operations, something you live every day, what do you feel is the most important factor in determining the automation that fits your business? And how do you gauge the risk/reward balance when you select that technology, and whether it's new or emerging in the market?
Yeah, so continuing on what Jordan was talking about, for me, looking forward, one of the biggest things is flexibility. So Jordan spoke a lot about the transition more to e-commerce channels, but also I think we're seeing the move for wholesale and those retail markets where they're moving away from big box distribution, and they want us to fulfill more direct to store. So it looks a lot more like an e-commerce model for retail than it did historically. So flexibility in how we're able to utilize automation to service those different channels. The second thing with flexibility is thinking around how can I utilize these technologies in multiple processes. So can it be used as what degree can I use it as a storage solution and a picking engine, or any other multiple avenues that we can go down there. The last thing that I really think a lot about these days is about associate experience and labor recruitment. So I think all technology is driven towards, or all of this automation is driving towards a reduction in labor, but I'm also starting to think about how do I disassociate our labor from a steady state flow across our distribution center where, I've got to have 100 associates to pick, 100 associates to pack because it just flows that way through the process. But can I have pick work then queue up to be able to pack later? Or can I pack it and then later load it or sort it, do any of those types of things? And then to the second part of your question where you're talking about the risk versus reward of these technologies, I will say in the evaluations we've done, there are a lot of standard ways that you can evaluate these from a cost perspective, from a business disruption perspective. And I can say I think a lot about how we evaluate our partners, the folks behind these solutions that are supporting them. We are absolutely going to have bumps in the road. We're going to see disruptions, in when we bring things up. There is never going to be 100% smooth go live, right? And so we've got to have a good partnership with folks, and that's got to be is going to be more and more of a big piece of our evaluation of the risk and evaluating technologies.
Awesome. So Chip, the labor question I think rolls perfectly into 3PLs, right? So third-party distribution historically has been very dependent on labor, right? And the very aversion to the high capital purchases to support end customer business. Pre-pandemic, the shift was beginning to move towards that more automated options to keep up with the order volumes. What's the pandemic done that's changed the approach to business, and how do 3PLs stay ahead of the curve while remaining cost competitive?
Yeah, so to the point that everyone's talked about, right, the cost of labor has exploded in the last even really 6 to 8 months, really pulling ahead about 3 or 4 years of inflation from just a pure labor cost standpoint. And so what that's really driven from a 3PL standpoint is to your point, traditionally it's been very labor dependent. When peaks come up, you onboard more people. When peaks go down, you shift them to a different operation or offboard those employees. And now what we're really having to do is explore very flexible solutions. So traditional conveyor systems and rack supports and mezzanine loop sorters and things like that are very bolted down. They're pretty rigid solutions. They are designed to hit specific order types or order profiles, product types. And so in the 3PL warehouse, where traditionally, our contracts with our customers are 3 to 5 years in length, we have to be more, open to different types of solutions. So we might not find the perfect technology for a particular solution, but one that can be applied to multiple different types of product or multiple different types of operations. And so that's been a big shift for us, is really we've got to open our eyes and really look forward into these technology solutions. But also what the industry has done is kind of helped us to the capital standpoint. So because of a lot of these robotic solutions are modular, you buy a bot, you buy a rack, we get a lot more robots as a service. So with the robot as a service, instead of us having to spend, $10, $20, $30 million to build out infrastructure and hope for the next 5 to 10 years worth of labor reductions to pay off that infrastructure, we can pay as we go, right? A term, kind of pay by the drink. And so the other thing that allows us to do is when peak volume comes up, again, instead of having to build, large, massive systems for a peak day, which is historically Black Friday, a 5 to 10 day period throughout the year, when the remaining part of the year the volumes aren't there to justify the investment, we can now rent those bots. We can rent the additional infrastructure needed to support that volume and then return it. Also, what that typically does is helps from a ongoing maintenance costs as well. Usually those leasing include ongoing maintenance or bot replacement if a bot were to go down or have any damage of that kind. So in the 3PL world, we've really got to look more on these modular solutions, really look away from traditional conveyor sortation, loop sortation systems that are very capital intensive, very long lead times to the point that Mike made earlier to design, build, and deploy, especially now with the lack of material that's available in the market. And I think everyone's heard of the chip shortages that's been going on, and just overall ability to get material into the country. A lot of those robotic solutions require a lot less material. It's a lot less capital. It's a lot less need, and typically can be deployed within your existing operation, which is massive from a 3PL standpoint, because at the end of the day, we're paid to service our customers, right, and take care of their customers. And so the quicker we can react to that, and we've got to be cognizant they pay us to be successful. They don't accept downtime, and so we have to be able to quickly shift, so that way we can control our costs while also still servicing the customer at the end of the day. So really the advancement in the last, call it 2 to 3 years, of these robotic solutions and the scalability and the way they price those 2 3PLs and 2 other providers has really allowed us from a 3PL standpoint to truly invest into those and explore those and grow our business with them as we see fit.
Awesome.
So
I just have one point that I'd like to make in addition, is that, and it was addressed very well, a lot of these robotic solutions, if you think about it, they do have the maintenance, ongoing maintenance with it, but they're actually fairly simplistic, right? I mean, if you can work on a fork truck, you can work on an AMR if you need to. So they're not only flexible, fast, convenient, but they're very serviceable.
Yeah, and the other thing that it does a lot from a 3PL standpoint is, typically we have multiple warehouses across a geography or across a country, and really we can treat that network as one big facility. We're able to shift those bots from building to building or from site to site, operation to operation on our own, without the need for additional providers to come in and move it for us. We can, load on a truck, unload it off the truck, and let it go off and run in its new operation. So for us, that's very key. It also allows us to explore customers with kind of offsetting traditional Black Friday peaks, things that might be like swimwear, where you have a traditional summer peak, or sandals that have a summer peak versus a traditional Black Friday peak that you have with most apparel and electronic customers. And so, by being able to really spread those assets across multiple customers with different peak periods and allow us to control that movement and that balance is key from a 3PL standpoint in order to control our cost and really still be able to provide a lower cost. Because while everyone knows pandemic prices have exploded, customers still want reduction. And so while our costs keep going up, we have to find creative ways to drive their costs down to keep our customers happy and with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Chip. Mr. Zach, knowing that many times the cost justification for emerging warehouse technology is higher than traditional methods, have you experienced a shift in the way customers view and justify that ROI? And is there a prevalent trend that you find common with that new justification?
Thank you, Drew. That was a great question. There's definitely been some shifts and some trends that we're kind of keying in on around ROI justification really in the last 6 to 12 months. I'll just keep them to 3 high-level trends. One really being, and I think each person has already echoed this, is really around labor, but not so much just labor and the cost of labor, but availability of labor, or the lack thereof, and the capability to hit the customer's SLA. So really weighing the cost and understand what that cost is if they miss the SLA versus not being able to hit that, and utilizing automation to hit that, and almost guaranteeing that capability to hit that SLA versus having to rely on people or labor that might not be available. That has helped push years of ROI out. Some customers are looking at greater than traditionally 2, sometimes 3 or 4 years, depending upon what kind of industry they're fulfilling to. And really the sheer cost to recruit, train, and maintain employees has increased significantly. And I think that's one of the big highlight areas. that we've seen is really the cost to do that is sometimes allocated up to 1/4 or 1/3 of that value per year of that person. So you really have to play that into account, and we're utilizing that a lot in our ROI trends for our customers. And just to give you an example, the other day, one of our customers was telling us that they're doing a staffing plan for their facility, and really within that 1 calendar year, they're assuming that they will actually turn over that entire staff of that facility in that same time period, which is huge. So that's a lot of cost, and they're just going out recruiting, training, and maintaining those employees. So that's really a big one. The other part of it is building off that in the fulfillment design demand, excuse me, and now designing for peak day or even peak hour, really anticipating that and having the capability to grow with demand. I think Chip said it well, and it might have been echoed a couple other times, is the flexibility of that technology. Can I rent robots in order to help me expand that throughput during that heightened period in which I need to get my fulfillment out? Maybe I need to increase my storage. Maybe I need to increase my capacity within that building. And being able to move around that technology and the flexibility of that technology is really big. So just as an example, we're working with a customer right now that's building goods to person system with their max storage and the max number of stations that they need. And really, they're only putting the robots in to utilize a couple of the stations. And really what they'll end up doing is they'll add robots year over year, or just during peak timeframes in which they may need them, and they'll lease those robots for that time period. So really that flexibility is key. And I think you've heard each one of the panelists talk about flexibility of technology and being a part of that and really driving to that ROI. The last one is really utilization of the square footage, really talking around vertical cube. In the past, that's really been huge in brownfield environments because the building is set in a facility or in a size, and you only have a specific area to work within. But that's really starting to come prevalent in greenfield facilities, and basically being able to increase the cost for that, maybe a system that is a little bit more expensive, a little bit more costly storage. And really, it's the value to have everything within that facility being able to pick out of one medium. Because what it goes back to is your labor and having to retrain that labor as you bring new labor in, really reducing complexity, reducing training, and reducing touches within a facility. Even though it might cost a little bit more, having it all within one technology and one storage medium really will help drive that efficiency, especially going into peak timeframes when customers need to expand their workforce. And a customer we're working with right now too as well, we're working with them on a brand new design, and they have a 250,000 square foot building right now. And with technology and utilizing the vertical cube, they were able to get the same storage capacity and throughput out of a facility that's 100 square foot or 100,000 square foot less in size, and really allowing them to do that. And when we take a step back and look at how consumers are demanding quicker fulfillment, and we're having to put these fulfillment facilities within a higher densely populated area, square footage is huge, and the value is higher. So how do we help our customers be able to put in a facility that's smaller, utilize that vertical cube as much as possible, but still maintain the throughput they may get at a facility that's, hundreds of miles away instead of close to the consumer? So really, in summary, like the three main points that we're seeing with trends is just availability of the workforce, the costing to retain, and really driving that for justification of technology in order to hit a desired ROI. Utilizing technology to anticipate or account for demands for a peak day or even a peak hour. And we're seeing that really highlighted more and more as consumers demand just-in-time fulfillment or the next day or same day even fulfillment. And then finally, really the efficiency and throughput with storage in a smaller footprint, utilizing the cube and getting as much throughput and storage in the square footage as they possibly can. So those are really three trends that we're starting to see in the ROI when customers consider technology.
I think I can speak for all of us here. It's interesting to see the ROI swap more than anything else, from the hard line, how many months does it take to pay back, going to the new, how much market share do I lose or customer base do I lose based on availability of product in hand. Awesome, thanks guys. So I have one final question I'm going to ask the group, and I'll go around and ask for your feedback if that's okay. The pandemic has caused a shift in our industry much faster than any of us thought was possible due to the need for customers to protect market share during unprecedented times. Do you feel the urgency to come up with creative, more advanced ways of utilizing warehouse automation is going to be a focus long term, Or do you think the market shifts back into the comfort zone of the 3 decades prior to the COVID pandemic? Jordan?
Yeah, so I do believe that that technology will continue to increase upon itself, and new efficiencies will be recognized. So I do firmly believe that while we're in a different kind of distribution where people are taking more leaps of faith, I don't think that's a trend. In other words, I don't think that's just going to be something that's over by this time next year. So I feel that technology will continue to build upon itself. People will still continue to look for what else is out there. I mean, think about something that's been around for a long time. It takes a lot of labor. Is packing. It's like, well, what am I going to do with my packing? How do I get less people with packing and more efficiency? So while there may not be as many new technologies or new manufacturers coming out, I do see the innovation of maybe existing technologies and ways to use it differently than used before. But the trend will continue to be, in my opinion, doing more with less.
What are your thoughts, Matt?
I think anybody who's goes back to the status quo beforehand is setting themselves up for failure. You got to continue to think about it, evaluate technologies, and that's, I think, what's going to happen is folks see that they're going to think about different ways that we've talked about today that is going to lead them to invest and continue investing and innovate, as Jordan was just talking about, with the technologies they've got. So I definitely don't see us going back to status quo.
Chip, from a company who's very traditional, that's a good way of putting it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, robotics is here, right? It's not going away. It's only going to explode more, right? So as more technology gets poured into robotics' ability to, today a lot of it's in transportation. The bot's moving the tote, or the bot's moving the rack of the product to the person. But get it more detailed into being able to really pick the product, to maybe even pack the product, and really get into these more sophisticated systems. Recruiting people, as Zach brought up, is massive, right? And people like technology, right? I mean, everybody plays on a device. Everyone has a mobile, a smartphone, and no one does flip phones anymore, right? People like to interact with the technology. So even if pay rates do come down, there's still always going to be a competition for the best people to be in that warehouse, and the less you need, the better. And then, the investment that we see from a lot of these new robotics companies of people from MIT and all these different distinguished firms really getting into warehouse technology is exciting, but it's also just proves more and more to that point that that's where this industry is going. It used to be a lot of the robotic solutions were poured into manufacturing, right? And a lot of that was in the manufacturing world with car manufacturing and everything else. Well, a lot of that's gone overseas due to labor, but distribution, it's going to come out of the U.S., right? And so a lot of those technology systems are going more towards being able to solve warehouse solutions because, again, e-com's here, the malls aren't coming back. They're only going to get less and less populated as time moves forward, and maybe even become DCs themselves. And so those are things that, again, the robotics is here. Conveyance system will still be used to do long haul transportation within warehouses and things like that, but really investment in the really product to person interaction in the warehouses will continue to be pushed on the robotic side.
Awesome. Zach?
Yeah, Drew, I'm only going to magnify everything everybody else talked about, because I really think as we take a step back and look at pre-COVID, there was challenges with the labor force then, right? It only took and magnified that 100 times. And now also, as we've talked about, the demand. So now you have the staffing challenges and the demand challenges, and it's really only going to continue to increase. Being the innovative guy and really driving to that, I think that's really going to be the forefront of the future. So I don't think it's going to slow down. In fact, I think it's actually going to pick up. And really, it's pushed companies and fulfillment customers and that type of thing to automation being nice to have if you have the bandwidth, the time, and the CapEx to, you need it, and it's required in order to hit the demands of your customers. And so I really don't think that's going to slow down or change anytime in the near future.
Last but certainly not least, Mike, what are your thoughts?
So I just think there's so many pressure points on operators today. It doesn't really matter what channel you're in, whether it's retail, e-com, 3PL, wholesale. what's going on within the four walls of a DC we've been talking about, but let's not forget transportation challenges outside the DC. How do we get the customers? Yeah, so we can put it through the DC faster and at lower cost. So how do we get it to the customer? Last mile considerations are coming with a vengeance. And, you know, these cost drivers are not going to change. They're not falling back. You know, now they may flatten a little bit, but they're not falling back. So the driver for this change is going to be sustainable. And what's interesting to me is when you start hearing CFOs say, look, go get this done, right? We're going to allocate the money. If we have to change our capital hurdle rates or whatever, however they evaluate, we're going to do it because we can't afford not to do it. So this thing is going to continue. And I think what you're going to see evolving, if you look at, you know, obviously I'm talking a lot about robotic solutions. I apologize, but that's where I've lived my life in the last 3 years. The next phase of this is where where robotics to robotics solutions are leveraged, and you just keep squeezing out more and more inefficiencies. And so we're on the cusp of a major revolution here that's going to continue. And I'll give you one example. I not only work with on advisory boards, but I talk to a lot of senior executives I've known throughout my career. People are starting to evaluate replacing their technical debt because they recognize that there is a debt to technology. It's only going to last so long. And no matter what you scream about, if the rate of change is so high, you're going to do it. We have people looking at taking down PIC modules to put in robotic solutions. So it's wherever the creativity of the partnership between the suppliers and the customers takes us, but I see that just growing dramatically.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much today for joining us, giving us insights to these questions and taking time. It's much appreciated. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully everybody else did. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.